that's how we started last time. I was sort of like leaning into the frame. This is
Or part 5.
last time we were sitting on. You can tell the story.
Well, we were sitting on the bench on Broadway, West 107th Street. And that's where we were sitting. Yeah.
How would you describe what you were saying last time?
Well, let me start with these.
Go for it.
Yeah. I want to fix up a couple of things that were a little unclear last time. First thing is that my blog / website, which really needs some work, but you've looked at it, so people can still see a lot on it, even though I need to work on it. I think I gave the address incorrectly last time. It is time 2, the number 2, the numeral, .blogspot.com. It is time 2.blogspot.com. Okay. I also, one of the things that I wrote some notes. I looked through the video and I wrote some notes. Wait a minute. Put my these are my poor man's bifocals. I get laughed at a lot, especially by the young people. But what are you going to do? Okay. So wanted to mention. I talked about how when I first started working in Harlem, 67 and 68, I would try to explain to my friends about what I was learning there, and especially about white racism and white institutional racism. But it didn't work. I couldn't get them to understand what I was trying to say. And then I remembered that the way that I had learned all that I had learned up until that point, and actually the rest of my life too, was not from one of my friends telling me what their experience was. It was from me, myself, meeting people, meeting black people for the first time, really. Really getting to know black people. As I mentioned, I had played ball against them, throughout my lifetime. But you don't get to know somebody when you're on the athletic field. So when I came into the city and started going all over the city, to different communities and talking to people, that's when I really started to learn things. So it occurred to me that what I need to do is just bring people together. So that was the impetus for my program, where I started bringing inner city, mostly black kids, some Latino kids at that time, together with white kids. And we just created a safe environment, physically and emotionally safe environment, respectful environment, where they could share ideas and really hear each other and get to know each other. So that program has gone on ever since. It never took off the way I wanted it to, and that was partly my own fault. Never occurred to me the things that I was not strong at, I should have found people in the community who were strong at those things and who shared my vision. But I didn't do that. At any rate, even in its limited form, it still has gone on ever since. And we started that in 1969. We've done about 120 partnerships. So it's directly affected probably, I would say, 3,000 kids who are now adults. And whatever effect it may have had on their life later on, who knows? So I'm sure that the experience of those 3,000 did impact other people as well. Because every one of those 120 or so partnerships, the overwhelming majority of kids from both groups really learned a lot and really felt good to meet the kids from the other group. They were constantly saying things like, well, when can we do this again? You know, that was really great. I had no idea that I was going to feel so connected to them. They are, like, I thought we were different, but really they're the same as us. Different in some ways, different music, maybe different experiences, but you know, we're all so much alike. Anyway, so I just wanted to clarify that part. And that's a program that I want to get back into and see if we can, especially, I mean, our society is still such a, still, it's probably even more so, a me, us, them, us society. So I really want to figure out a way to get that program happening more so. It's still going on a little bit, but it really needs to be happening on a much larger scale. So that's one thing. Let me see what other things I wrote down here that I wanted to comment on. Another one is when I was talking about the Stevenson Improvement Club, Stevenson High School Improvement Club, the student survey we did. You asked about kids who were, like, a behavior issue. Kids who were being disruptive in the classroom. And one of the questions on the student survey, which, as I mentioned last time, I'll repeat again, the students themselves came up with those questions. So it was a legitimate, authentic survey. Most of the time when surveys are done in schools, the questions come from the adults. And you know, if you ask the wrong questions, it doesn't do any good. So these questions came from the kids. All right, so to get back to specifically, one of the questions on the Stevenson student survey was about what should be done about the kids who were consistently disrupting classrooms with their behavior. And let me read this. I actually cut and pasted it from the report. 72.4%, this is out of 1,798 students who responded. 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Honors kids, special ed kids, bilingual, all kinds of students, whole real cross-section. So 72.4% felt that continually disruptive students should be transferred out. 38% felt that very strongly. Only 11% disagreed. This was the part that was particularly interesting. 16.6%, which is like 1 out of every 6 kids, wrote down not sure. And when these results came back, I wondered why there were so many not sures. So the next time we had our regular meeting, the regular Stevenson Improvement Club meeting, we had about 15 kids there that day. Generally our core was 15 to 18 kids. And so I asked the students, did they have any sense about this? Well, it happened that 3 of the kids at the meeting that day were 3 of the kids who wrote down not sure. And so we asked them, what was that about? What was you not sure about? Okay, and again, I'm going to read from the report. When asked why, all 3 had the same concern. They did not want the disruptive students to be thrown out of school and forgotten about. They wanted to be sure these young people would be able to go to another program that might better meet their needs. All 3 agreed that continually disruptive students should be transferred out of the building as long as the Board of Ed would still try to help them. So I thought that was pretty impressive, you know. And there's no way of knowing if the other 300 or so kids who wrote down not sure felt the same way. But since all three who were there felt that way, I'm thinking that that was probably a big part of the issue.
And a lot of other ones felt the same way too, but there wasn't an answer.
Yeah, we didn't have a vehicle in there for, and that would have been a good thing. Like, you know, if you're not sure, tell us about why you're not sure. That would have been a good thing to do. But we
Or are you in favor of them being transferred out if they could be transferred to?
That's right. We could have, if we had worded it that way, because then it would have been 72.4% plus 16.6. It would have been 89% of the kids in the school are saying when other kids are disrupting the classroom, that should not be allowed. They should be taken out. Because that doesn't happen. You know, that's one of the, and that's one of the issues. You know, like you hear a lot about the economic disparity. You'll hear that kids in suburban areas, middle class and upper class areas, public schools, have a lot more money going to their schools than the kids in the inner city and the poor areas. You hear that a lot. But one thing that you don't hear is what this thing here is showing. You know, that like if you were in a middle class or upper class area, I don't like using upper and lower, but economically speaking, right? If you were in one of those areas and there were kids disrupting the classroom, parents would be in an uproar. And they would be in the school and they would be saying, no good, you cannot allow kids to disrupt. My child is trying to learn. She wants to listen to the teacher. He wants to hear what the teacher is saying. It is not fair, it is not just for them to be sitting in a classroom where you can't learn anything because people are being disruptive. It would not happen. It would not be allowed, and the administration in that school would make sure that they did something about it. In the inner city, it doesn't work like that. The administration does not pay a lot of attention to the needs and wants of the poorer communities. So what has consistently happened is that the disruptive kids are in the classroom. The teacher is told it's your responsibility to find a way to make the subject interesting enough or somehow create the atmosphere in your classroom where they stop being disruptive. You know, but that's almost impossible, especially when it wouldn't be impossible if you could design a class that was where the curriculum was curriculum that was relevant to the needs and the wants of the kids, because then they would behave. But when you have a ridiculous curriculum that does not have any connection to the lives of the kids, and these kids do not come from the kind of background where they are, from an early age, kind of programmed. You've got to go to college, you've got to go to college, you've got to get into the best college you can get into, you've got to get the highest grades you can. Those kids, the kids who are programmed that way, they don't have to like the teacher or like the subject, because they're programmed to get high grades. They're going to study, they're going to do their homework, they're going to try to get high grades. But with the kids who don't come from that background, you put a boring curriculum in front of them, and often a teacher who they don't connect with. And part of the reason they don't connect with the teacher often is because the teacher is often not allowed to be his or her authentic self. Mm-hmm. They don't allow us, the system does not allow us to teach in the way that is most comfortable for us, that we're most skilled at. That's what I was saying last time. Only 10 or 12% of the time, and all the time that I was with the education system, public school education system, about 10 or 12% of the time, I was allowed to run the class the way that I felt it needed to be run. And for me, that means to run the class in the way that the students wanted it to be run. Okay? The rest of the time, I was trying to, because I had 2 kids to support. I got to keep my job, and I also felt like the system is so bad that it needs, when there is somebody who really cares about the kids, we need as many of those kinds of people as possible. So I wanted to stay within the system. I wanted to try to change it. I wanted to do the best that I could do. I guess you can hear.
No, that's her. I mean, she knows I'm here.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so I stayed within the system for the pragmatic reasons of being one person who the kids could trust and talk with and learn something from, and also because I had to pay the bills, take care of my kids.
What is it that the system asks of you that isn't right?
Well, the thing is that everybody has a different style, and there are some people who like some of the most successful teachers in the system are the ones who have kind of like a forceful, kind of like a Marine, sergeant kind of thing, but with caring. See, one thing about especially inner city kids, or probably especially poor kids anywhere, probably in the Appalachian area and rural areas also, but I just haven't worked there. But definitely with the inner city kid, they are very perceptive, and they know when a teacher cares about them or not, or a principal or anybody. They are very perceptive, and they can tell when you care about them. So you can be a strict disciplinarian. In fact, it's a good thing. If you're a strict disciplinarian who cares about the kids, that's good. That's going to be an effective teacher within the system. Because then even if the curriculum is boring, because the kids care about the teacher, and they know the teacher cares about them, and they know it would be to their advantage to get a higher grade, they'll behave themselves and they'll get higher grades. But there aren't that many teachers who have that kind of sense of authority along with the caring. Okay? Now for me, I've always been a very caring guy, but I'm a more gentle, quiet person. I don't have that presence. Interestingly, when I was younger and I was substitute teaching, I could go into a classroom with the really difficult, disruptive kids and make it work. But as I got older, and part of it I think is just the fact that, there's a difference between me walking in as a 25, 26-year-old sort of hippie-looking guy. And as I said, I was athletic. I was strong. At recess, I could go out and play basketball with the guys. And, so that allowed me to get a certain rapport with the students, where they would listen to what I was saying, and then as long as you would listen to what I was saying, we would get into really interesting things in the classroom. But as I got older and was not so athletic, I think became, especially if I was trying to sub, like an old white guy. Who's this old white guy? They're not relating to me at all as a young person who has certain similarities to them. It's like some old white guy who probably knows nothing about my world, So even as a regular teacher, not just as a sub, but as a regular teacher, being forced to follow a curriculum that bored the hell out of me along with the kids, it was pretty much impossible for me to make material interesting that bored the hell out of me. Mm. If I had been allowed the whole time I was there to run the classes the way that I knew they needed to be run, the way that I was able to run them for 10 or 12% of the time, I could have done so much more good during the 30 years or so that I was teaching. So much more. I do want to say this, though, that there was one time where I was allowed to run the class the way I wanted to, where it didn't work. And that was the problem there was that when I asked permission to do this class, I ran it by the principal and she agreed. But the mistake that I made was what I should have said to her is that this has to be on a voluntary basis. Okay, I was working in a school with, had a lot of gang members, an alternative school that had a lot of gang members, or a lot of kids who either had already been locked up or were going to be locked up in the future, unfortunately. And I had just worked at Rikers, and at Rikers we put together a tremendous education program for 1 year until the system came in and said you can't do it this way anymore.
Oh.
That happens all the time. But during that, to digress, during that 1 year at Rikers, we ran a program that was democratic and respectful, and where students had a strong say in what we were doing, where we honored their voices, we honored them. And school was so good then that I'm getting chills thinking about it. It was like when Sunday night came, you couldn't wait for Monday morning to get back to school, And when it was Sunday, it was just amazing. It was just fabulous. So I'm thinking, when I left that program because I was in charge of that piece. I was teacher in charge. And when they forced it to change, I left. And so a year or two later, I'm at this other school. And so I asked the principal if I could run this special program. She agreed. Let me just turn this sound down. But it did not occur to me. It was, and in retrospect, it was really stupid, because at the prison, the kids they were even though they were locked up, that wasn't voluntary, but whether they chose to come to school or not was voluntary. Okay, and this at this school, at this high school I'm talking about, where I did this, it should also have been voluntary. It should have been approached this way. It should have been there was a core of disruptive kids in the school. So it should have been that people who knew them well, principal or counselors or teachers who happened to get along well with them, could have said, look, this guy who's new to our school is going to run a program. He runs it differently. You're going to have a voice that you don't normally have in class, and blah, blah, blah. Right now you're not doing well in school. Do you want to give this new way a try? Okay, your choice. You try it out. If you like it, fine. If you don't like it, you can go back to regular classes. It should have been done that way. And I really messed that up. Instead, what I suggested is just getting a list of the kids who need this and what's the word? Program them into this class that I'm going to be running. So they walked in with a chip on their shoulders. And then again, I'm a white guy. None of these guys were white kids, right? And I'm an old white guy. This wasn't that long ago. I wasn't as old as I am now, but I was still pretty old. And because I have a gentle, soft way of working, they wouldn't give me a chance. Mm-hmm. They just walked in, why are we forced to be in here? There's no girls in the class. That bothered them. So that just did not work, and that's on me. I totally missed that piece about it's got to be voluntary. You can't force something like that on people. But that aside, every other time where I was allowed to design a class on my own, which, as I said, on my own always meant with the kids. Every other time that we did that, it was very effective, very successful, and also discontinued for one reason or another, they were always discontinued. Let me see if there's anything else here that I wanted to comment about. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, there were a couple of other things. Because the last time, at the end of our fourth session, you know, by then I'd gotten really cold. And my brain, you know, that was like about 3.5 hours after we had started, my brain wasn't working that well. So I want to go back to what we were talking about, because I didn't say some of that as well as I wanted to. One thing that I had suggested, I think the way this came up was that you asked me about what we could do to change things, to make things, you know, different in the school system. And so one of the things I spoke about was the school improvement club, you know, like the one that we had at Stevenson. And I suggested that if we could get whatever number of principals in New York City would agree to start a school improvement club or group within their school, whatever number that would be, and I think I said if it was, say, 28, have them do that. Have them set up the school improvement group, which to review meant that would be open to every single person in the school community, who wanted to be a part of a group of people who were going to make the school as good as it could be. So every student was invited, every teacher, every para, every secretary, custodian, administrator. When we did it at Stevenson, we also invited parents. So anybody who wanted to be a part of that was welcome. And any type of student, for example, the honors kids, the special ed, the bilingual kids, every one of them, the well-behaved kids, the not well-behaved kids, as long as you were willing to sit as a part of this group, share ideas, and interact with people respectfully, then you were welcome. Okay? So, let's say that 28 principals in the system agreed to start a school improvement group. So my next suggestion was then do that, and then assess it. I said assess it after a year or two. In thinking about it, what I think would be more appropriate would be to assess it as it goes along. You know, assess it during the first semester, during the second semester. Take a look at the school climate. Is there a different feeling in the school? Is attendance better? Is the yeah? Come on. This is your house.
No, I don't want to disturb
No,
you.
no, I appreciate that, but
Excuse me.
yeah.
Because if you are in the middle of something, it will spoil.
No, that's all right. This is a naturally flowing New York City experience. Thanks a lot, man. So, you know, so assess it all along. Graduation rates, that would take, you know, that would be something you'd have to assess after a year or two. But graduation rates, attendance, school climate, are the number of fights or disruptive behavior in the classroom, are they changing at all? All these kinds of things. And I am very, very confident that if you created the school improvement club or group the way that I'm talking about, where every single person was invited, and I also mentioned last time, those people who wanted to be a part of to have a say in how the school was run, but couldn't join, maybe they didn't have the time to be actually in the group. You have to have a vehicle in place where their input can also be heard. It might be a website where they can write in their suggestions, or or the old-fashioned suggestion box that they can drop in, but some vehicle where every person in the school knew that even if I can't be a physical member of the school improvement group, my opinion, my needs, my ideas are still going to be a part of the conversation. So if you do that, and let's say 28 schools did that, I don't have any doubt that every single one of those schools would improve in a way that was noticeable. And probably quite noticeable, especially after a year or two. So then the hope would be that as you are assessing these schools with this inclusive, truly democratic process, because kids would, they would have a say about the school, the rules of the school. They'd have a say about the food in the cafeteria. They'd have a say about curriculum. They'd have a say about everything. Not that they would run it. In fact, probably for a principal to feel comfortable with it, it would need to be kind of thought of as an advisory group where the principal still had a veto power. I don't think it wouldn't be a full democracy. I don't think, because I don't think many principals are going to, go against what they really feel. So I'm okay with it being an advisory group as long as the principal is really listening and working with the group to make changes. Or to keep things going, that if something is good, keep it going, maybe even expand it. The thought that I had in looking back at the interview we already did, the thought that I had that's a little different than that is maybe, let's say, if the chancellor of the school system or a regional superintendent were to agree that, hey, this school improvement group would be a good thing to have in every single one of our schools. And then maybe it could be mandated to try this out, to have a school improvement group. Problem there is it would have to be done. If it's mandated, you might have principals doing things that they don't really want to do. So even as I'm speaking right now, probably the safer way to do it would be more on a voluntary basis, where the principal is really into the idea of trying out this school improvement group. The other thing that I started to talk about, and this part this is where my brain really froze, and I said, we got to stop here because I'm not thinking that clearly, was, all right, so to change the system, the school improvement group one would be working within the system, which is part of what we need to do. But we also, in my opinion, need to work outside the system. And so I started to talk about unschooling. Unschooling is a type of homeschooling where the student studies what he or she is really interested in. And you can do, the kid studies whatever he or she's interested in. You can apprentice with people in the neighborhood who are skilled at what you're interested in. Somebody who loves music can go down to a music studio and apprentice there. It creates a lot of real life experiences that don't happen in regular school. And related to that, so my thought is that, and another way to look at this is kind of community schools, because it doesn't have to be like what we should do, in my opinion, is start a bunch of community schools or homeschool resource centers, or you can call it different things. You have to, from a legal standpoint, if a kid is still at school age and does not go to a regular school, then he or she needs to be registered as a homeschooler. But you can have a group over here, a group of 20 or 30 or 40 kids in this community school. And that community school can have a theme emphasis. There's a, I ran across both in Chicago and New Orleans, African-centered homeschool resource centers or community schools. And I'm sure there are African-centered schools all over the place, but I just happen to know about these two. Another thing I want to mention that people could, I can't remember the names of those places right now. I didn't have time to look them up. But there is a program in Hadley, Massachusetts that I like a lot. That is a good, people could Google. It's called North Star. And the website, I'm quite sure, is northstarteens.org. And this program is an example of what I'm talking about, where there's, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 kids, 60 kids, I'm not exactly sure what. But the kids have a say in what goes on. They are allowed to and encouraged to study the things they're interested in. They're not forced to do things they don't want to do. They do a lot of apprenticing. These are kids who, and I mentioned this last time on the tape too, every one of us is unique. We all have particularly different strengths and weaknesses. You know, we're the same in that we have strengths and weaknesses. We're the same in that we have things that we can teach and things that we need to learn, or that we can learn. But we're different with these specifics. You know, I'm strong in such and such, you're strong in filmmaking and other things. And my feeling, and I think a lot of people feel this way, is that each of us is kind of born with certain things that we're sort of meant to do. You know, certain things that we're just good at and that we're interested in, you know, that we just gravitate to. Now imagine, and this is what you can do in a community school like North Star, in an unschooling type of school, or a democratic school. That's another, there's a whole field out there called democratic education. And democratic education is, and there's thousands of schools throughout the world that are democratic schools. And most of them are small. Some are 10 or 15 kids, some are 30 or 40, 50, 60 kids, 100 kids. Pretty much they're small. But they are run the way that, and North Star is an example of a democratic school. They're not necessarily fully democratic, North Star or many of these other schools. But at the very core is the idea that every kid is respected as a human being and as a learner and as a teacher. So at a school like this, at a democratically run school or democratic education school or unschool, community school, kids can have the chance to really develop and work at what they're good at, what they are kind of meant to do. And imagine a society, if we had a society made up of people doing what they love and what they're good at. You know, wow. I mean, our system, the way it works, you bring kids into the classroom and you say, forget about what you're interested in, forget about what you're good at, open up your science pages to page 121 and let's start reading about amoebas. Chances are not too many kids in the classroom are thrilled about reading about amoebas right then. Now, there will be some kids in that school, in that community, who, yeah, I want to learn about amoebas, you know. But to force a majority of kids to do stuff that they are not interested in, when there are things that they are truly very interested in, it's a disservice to the kids, and it's a disservice to our communities, and it's a disservice to our world. So, to rehash, work within the system, start school improvement groups. in schools that already exist. Not monitor them, but check out how effective they are. And if they're effective, spread that to other schools. And then work outside the system where you have community schools, unschools, democratically run schools, or primarily democratically run. As I said, they're not usually fully democratic, but schools where the voices and the needs and the wants of the kids are honored. Have them on the outside. And the goal is to try to make as much of this democratic, student-oriented, student-respectful, and not just student. I mean, you're respecting everybody in the school community. In our society and in our schools, every single person needs to be treated with dignity and respect. Every single person. If you do that, when you're a part of a program or a town or a family or a school or a company where every single person, including yourself, is treated with respect and dignity, there's an energy that gets created. There's a sense of community. There's a culture that is so positive and uplifting. Just like at the Rikers program, you can't wait to be there. You know, you enjoy it so much. You feel so good because you are developing, you're learning. The way we ran it at Rikers, now Rikers, we were in a building where a lot of the hardcore inmates were. And Rikers we had two very big, very large rooms, very large. So large that you could have, in each of the four corners of these two rooms, so in 8 different locations, we had something different going on. And the students were free to go to whichever corner they felt like going to. And they could stay there as long as they wanted to. So there was this sense of, respect. Like, they're respecting me. Now, the only rule was you've got to behave yourself. All right? You've got to behave yourself. You cannot disrupt what people are trying to do. Now, one advantage of running a school in a jail, because Rikers Island Prison is really a jail, by the way. I don't know, most people, I don't know if you know the difference, but prison is generally where you get sent if you've got a sentence of 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. You get sent away to prison. Rikers is a kind of a holding prison where for guys who have not yet, or women, who have not yet been convicted of anything or of this particular crime that they are being accused of. It's where they are housed until they go to court to find out whether they are going to be sent away to prison or they're going to be released because they're judged innocent. So it's really more of a jail. But people in Rikers are there for usually a few months, 3 or 4 months, maybe 6, 7, 8 months, awaiting trial or while their trial is going on. What was the point I wanted to make with that? I lost myself. I can't.
Well, you were saying the difference between prison and jail, or
Yeah.
you were teaching in Rikers.
Yeah, but that wasn't the point I wanted to make. Well, let me just leave it alone, see if it comes back to either one of us. That's part of the problem getting older. At any rate, so we had this set up. Oh, and again, remember I was talking earlier about teachers should be allowed to teach them the way that they're comfortable with? So I was teacher in charge, and I told all the teachers, teach the way you're comfortable, right? Because then you're going to do a good job. And
they came back, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. And because you're teaching the way that you're comfortable, you're going to be the best possible teacher that you can be. It's kind of like being played out of position. Like if you're on a football team and you're you're fast and you've got good moves, but you're not real big, you should probably be a running back or a wide receiver or something like that. You don't want to be playing that person as an offensive tackle, right? The tackle's got to be bigger and more powerful and maybe not quite as swift of foot. So it's the same thing. When you have a team, whatever the skills are of that particular player, play him or her at that position. And then you're going to get the best from that individual, and you're going to get the best from every other individual on the team. So the same thing with teaching. Let teachers teach the way that they can teach well. Then you're going to get the best. So that's what we did. Every single teacher taught the way he or she felt comfortable. And one of our best classes, one of the most popular classes, was the art class. Now this is interesting in a couple of ways. I mentioned last time how many, I've worked at Rikers, I've worked in the Tombs, I've worked with a lot of people who've been locked up or who end up being locked up. I have a son who's locked up out in South Dakota. I know that there are so many sensitive and creative people locked up in our jails and prisons. And I saw it again at Rikers. And so I would say not one of, probably the most popular post of these 8 posts that we had set up was the art section, run by a guy named Todd Rubin, who is a unique character. In certain ways, Todd's a little bit nerdy, which is interesting because here he is in a jail with some hardcore people, but they respected him because they could tell that he respected them and he cared about them. So here's this kind of nerdy guy, art teacher, who could have gotten eaten up in a regular, if he walked into a regular high school and tried to substitute teach with even regular students, let alone students who were inmates in a jail. I think he'd have been eaten alive. But because he was allowed to teach, Todd's style was, while the students were doing their artwork, Todd is engaging with them. He's not only helping them with their artwork. How's your family? How's your kid doing? What's your life all about? What are you in here for? How did this happen? What's going on? He had these conversations going on that showed how much he cared and allowed these guys to feel free and confident. It was just really nice. And so some of these guys would be there all day. And I was fine with that. That was fine. Whatever works for you, that's fine. And then we had other teachers who were more traditional. One of our teachers, the computer program, in jail you can't do too much with computers. Like, they're not allowed on the internet. Maybe there might be some jails where they do it, but for the most part, they're not allowed on the internet. But we did have a computer program, and the things that they were allowed to do. Now, the teacher who was doing it knew more than I knew, but did not know a whole lot. So the person who was really running that class was one of the inmates. The teacher was working as his assistant because he knew it better than the teacher. And you can do that in a democratic kind of program. You let the person who knows how to do it take the lead. You don't have to say, oh, he's not allowed to do it because he's not licensed. So it was just a great program. Whenever we had, we put on a party every now and then and invite the family to come in. The inmates were always a part of planning that. In fact, everything we did, we had regular meetings, where we would sit down and ask the guys, so how are things going? How are you feeling about what we're doing? What would you like to suggest that we do differently? Kind of like the school improvement thing, you know? Or whenever I was running, I mentioned this last time too, whenever I was running my own classroom, where I was allowed to run it the way that I want to, which again is the way that the students and I together want to, I always had weekly evaluation meetings, you know? Every Friday usually, whatever day it was usually Friday. How's it going? What are you liking that we're doing? What would you like to do more of? What would you like to do less of? Have any of you read any books or any articles that you think the class would like, or seen any movies? Because we would use video in different movies too. So everything was always collaborative and all about respect and all about allowing each person to feel that I am an actual human being and I have something worthwhile to contribute, you know? And that's like the essence of being alive, is to know that you feel that you have something to contribute, that you have a sense of pride, not the kind of pride, not a false pride, but an awareness that you're worthwhile. You know, that is a key, that and a sense of belonging are two of the most important things for people. And that sense of belonging happens when you have that. We had guys from different gangs who out on the street would have been going at each other, sometimes killing each other. And they're fellow students. And they are getting along and getting to know each other. Holy mackerel, I mean, it was like... And then at the end of the year, they said, we can't do it anymore. Can't do it anymore. Now, admittedly, I can understand to some degree where they were coming from, and I'm going to explain it in a minute. But there could have been an in-between. They could have allowed... Let me explain. Let me give the piece that you need to hear. The program that I was involved in at Rikers was called Horizons Academy. This was for 18 to 21-year-olds, even though we did allow older guys to come down if they showed a lot of interest. But it was for 18 to 21-year-olds who, and it was started as a result of a lawsuit. One of the guys who was there, who was between the ages of 18 and 21, and who had a special ed designation while he was in regular school, said, you know, I'm entitled to an education up to the age of 21, because special ed people are entitled to education up to 21. Or at least they were then. I don't know if that's changed or not. And so there should be a school here for me and for people who are in my position. So through that lawsuit, they opened up the school. And I was one of the first teachers at this school. And the principal, Gloria Ortiz, who I felt did a really good job, good person, she knew how I felt about education. She knew about, it's kind of interesting, I'll just do this as a side. The way that I got this job at Rikers, see, I always have to, because the Board of Ed, or the DOE now, but back when I was teaching most of the time, it was the Board of Ed, has always been such a challenging thing, that the thing that we talked about earlier, about trying to maintain your own self, your soul, while teaching in a system that is insisting that you teach things that you don't really think are important and teach in a way that isn't your own way. There's always such a challenge there of when do you stand up to your supervisor? When do you kind of kowtow and do what you have to do to keep your job? So you always have that ongoing struggle. Can't believe it, I'm losing my train of thought again.
Oh, always some kind of struggle.
Yeah,
I was listening to.
yeah. God, this is tough. You know, it's a good thing we're at least doing this interview now rather than 2 years from now, because I would remember like almost nothing probably then. So I am not quite sure where I was. The thing was opened up as a part of a lawsuit. Oh, I know what it was. Okay. So at the end of the year, now here, this program is working well. Oh, I know what it was. I was telling you about how I got hired at Rikers. I had taken, because the system is so difficult for me and for most people in it, students and adults, because it's so difficult, I had to periodically take a leave of absence,
Oh,
you know, or a sabbatical, whichever one. Sometimes I had a paid sabbatical, sometimes I had to take a leave of absence without pay.
oh,
But I had to get away, right? So after one of my leaves of absence or sabbaticals, I think it was a leave, I'm in the Alternative Schools Human Resources office. I'm going back in here to see if I can get a job in one of the alternative schools. And I've always felt that, you know, when I interview for a job, I want the real me to be there. You know, I want them to know that, you know, I am really good at this and I am not good at this. I don't want to pretend anything. So I'm in that room and I'm telling the head of human resources, this is who I am. This is who I am as a person. This is who I am as a teacher. And I'm going to end up with the ultimate question, can you think of a place in the alternative school system where I would fit in? Where there'd be a supervisor who would want somebody like me, you know? And usually there were one or two places where the supervisor would want somebody like me. So I go through my whole spiel. I believe this, I believe that, I do this, I'm good at this, I'm great at relating to kids. I hate lesson plans, I don't believe in doing lesson plans. I start the class off with something and then I see where the class wants to go with it and I go where the class wants to go with it, you know. So I'm telling them all my strengths and weaknesses and what I believe. Well, in the same room, within earshot, is Gloria Ortiz. She heard the whole thing. When I finished talking to this person, Gloria comes over to me, says, I want to hire you. So boom, I had, you know, I was one of the inaugural teachers at Horizon Academy at Rikers Island Prison, AKA jail. Well, not known as a jail, but it is. So Gloria knew my style. And what happened is the first semester that the school was open, it opened, pretty sure, if I remember correctly, it opened in the middle of the school year. And that first semester, she had me floating. She'd fit me in. Rikers, Horizon Academy, Rikers had, at that time, 11 different buildings with inmates in them. And Horizon had programs in 6 of those individual buildings. So that first semester, Gloria had me floating. Wherever she felt I could help out, I would go there and do something helpful. Or try to, you know, usually did. But one of the buildings, GRVC, the person who was running that program, it wasn't working out well.
mm-hmm.
So I said to Gloria at the end of the semester, I said, Gloria, I'll take that over if you want, if you let me do it my way, if you let me run it democratically. And she said, go for it. So for that summer, because we were open during the summer too, so July and August, and then the whole following year is when we ran that program. That was so powerful, so positive. I mean, there was not a person connected to that program who didn't like it. You know, I started to say earlier about you know, you had to be respectful. You can go wherever you want. You can stay there as long as you want. But the one rule is you've got to be respectful. And the advantage of having a school in a jail is if somebody's not acting correctly, you just go to the CO, correction officer, the guard, and say, hey, do me a favor, Ortiz needs to go back home. They take him out, bring him back to the cell. So, and we always...
Does he cry?
No, but they, you know, they realized that I liked school. You know, I would always tell them, whenever that would happen, when you come back the next day, everything's forgotten. I'm not carrying any grudges, you know. Yesterday either you were choosing to misbehave, or you had something bothering you that was so strong that you couldn't handle it, whatever the reason, you know. When you come back the next day, boom, it's a new ball game. We pretend that didn't happen, you know. So it was very, even that was respect oriented, because you had the respect for the other, you had respect for the other students, you had respect for the staff who was trying to run the program, and it even is about respect for that person, that you care enough about that person to not allow him to act in a way that's not healthy for him. And they knew that. And as I said, you know, inner city, poor people, they have what's the word I'm trying to think of, like
Instinctive?
Instinctive is not, that is just as good. You know, they have an instinct about who really cares about them, and, you know, they just, that's not, the word is not important. That's the issue. You know, they can tell. And they knew that I cared about them. And they knew that the other teachers cared about them, and the secretaries and everybody else. We all cared about each other. And like I said, the gang members from different gangs got along in a way that you wouldn't even know they were in different gangs. So it was a great program. The reason, here's the thing though, because it was a part of a lawsuit, because it was started as a result of this lawsuit, they had given Gloria a little bit more freedom than the regular system would allow. That's why she was able to say to me, yes, go run the program the way you want. She had that freedom. It was kind of like, get the program running. You have more freedom right now. Get the program running. But then at the end of the school year, now this was actually a year and a half later, because we had that first semester and then the full year. At the end of that school year, we were told that the lawyers are now going to come in and take a look at the school to see if it's running properly. So the word that Gloria got from the, I guess from the supervisor of alternative schools, I don't actually know who gave it to her, but I would assume so. The word is that you've got to be doing everything by the book now. So Gloria said to me, she knew I wasn't going to like hearing it, but she said to me, we got to do it by the book now. You've got to give them 45 minutes of English, 45 minutes of math, 45 minutes of social studies. And, you know, I said to her, Gloria, you know, I can't do that. You know, I've been very clear all along about what I believe in. Look at how well this program is running. I'm not going to be a part of putting it back to a traditional program that doesn't work. And so I reluctantly left. I left. And then soon after, you know, I was in the system somewhere else. Soon after, I was at this high school where I mentioned to you, where I went to the principal. I'm thinking in my head, you know, we ran such a great program at Rikers. The kids at this school who were being disruptive were, a lot of them had been in Rikers. You know, it was the same kind of kid in a way. So I can do this same program here, and they'll love it. And like I said, the thing that I forgot is that at Rikers, it was a choice. They didn't have to go to school. As soon as you mandate that you have to do it, That's a whole different ballgame. So I really messed that up. I totally blew that one. But that was the only one in all the years that I taught. In those few instances where I was allowed to run the class or a program the way that I felt it needed to be run, every single other time it was very effective, very successful, and always discontinued for one reason or another. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Well, when they discontinue it,
Yeah.
do they indicate some appreciation of the good stuff?
Generally, no. No, I mean, I didn't need that, personally. I don't know, maybe I don't know if the kids would have needed that or not. Those of us who were involved in these programs, we knew that they were really good. Myself and any other staff that were involved, and the kids, we all knew how good they were. So we didn't really necessarily need recognition for that. But it was just sad that when something good happens,
But, I
you
mean,
should
did
keep
they
it
know-
going.
Did they know what they were doing?
Who? The
people who
administrators?
killed it, yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
Unless no, I don't know. It's usually, it's like weird different things that happen. I explained that what happened at Rikers was that the lawyers were going to come in. Gloria was told, all your programs have to be by the book now. She was a new principal. She couldn't go up against them, or at least she felt she couldn't. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe she could have negotiated and said, look, I got 6 different programs. Only one of them runs a little uniquely. Can you let me keep that one running that way? Maybe she could have negotiated that. I don't know. I wasn't privy to the behind the scenes thing. Now, in a school improvement kind of program, that conversation could come out on the table. And Gloria could say, look, the people downtown are telling me we have to change this. What ideas do you have? And then I might have said to her, well, Gloria, why don't you see if they'll let you do 5 of 6 by the book, since they're running that way, and give you permission to keep ours running the way it's running, since it's so effective. But I didn't know, and Gloria didn't come to me saying, this is what's happening. Gloria came to me saying, you have to change the program. So I don't know. The time at Hempstead High School that we talked about, where I had the 10 very disruptive kids who were failing almost all their courses, and we created curriculum together. And that program, it started on April 1st, 1970, and I had been subbing at that school a lot, and the principal knew I had a real good rapport with kids, and so he asked me, would I run this program outside the school at the community center with these 10 kids? So I said, yeah. And he said, if it works, we'll continue it next year and maybe expand it. And it worked. Definitely worked. Every kid who was there would tell you that it worked. All the adults in the community who came, who were part of the program, who would come in as a guest speaker or as a tutor or helper, everybody involved. The only one who, and this might have been part of the issue, that the woman who ran the center, a good woman, older woman named Mrs. Gray, highly respected, but she did not relate well to the freewheelingness of it. She felt the teacher should be in charge, and
more order.
So I think she was the only one who actually saw the program who didn't speak highly of it. But all the students, everybody else said, this is a good program.
That fits in with that 16%.
Yeah. But
In other words, there is a solution to disruptive students that if you
treat them with respect, give them a different kind of program, and they can succeed, absolutely. And I always said that. I don't even want to go off into all this, but that was always what I was saying. They just need a different kind of program, And the stuff some teachers and administrators would talk about kids. before I go off there, I want to just finish this. At Hempstead, the biggest problem was that the principal who asked me to do that left at the end of the year, and a new principal came in during the summer. And that principal did not continue the program. You know, this was 1970 was a time when, you know, it was a big Black Power time, and there was a real strong thing about a lot of black people did not want white people running programs for black people.
Oh,
And I think that's part of what this new principal had, you know. He came in, he didn't know me, didn't know the program. And I think the fact that I was a white guy in charge of a program with 10 black kids, or 10 kids of color, I think 2 or 3 of them were Latino. I think that was a big part of why it didn't get, you know. But again, there's always some reason that happens.
what was the race of the principal?
Black. Both of them were black. So, but it's sad how many times, you know, like I said, it wasn't that often, but except for that one time, every time I did, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, 11, I don't even know exactly. I'd have to sit down and think about the times when I was able to do it the way I wanted to. But none of those programs were continued for various reasons. So it's crazy. It's
So
crazy.
the whole Board of Education system is just systematically on the wrong track. There's something.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's too many people who are sort of not on the front line who are making the decisions without input. You know, it's kind of like regular society. But no input from the working class, the lower class, the middle class, the regular, the 99%. You know, whatever input we want to give, they don't listen to or care about. You know, and then people who are disconnected from the world of the 99% are making decisions that are affecting the 99%. So the schools are just a microcosm of society, you know, and it's the same kind of thing. You got the wrong people making decisions that affect people's lives. And it's tragic. It's tragic for the kids, the people who get hurt by it, and it's tragic for society to not have the gifts that these individuals, these kids, these students, these inmates could offer.
Now, did Bloomberg try to do something about it?
I don't
I
remember.
remember it was a fight over school chancellors. Or that was Koch?
Oh God, I don't remember. I liked Richard Green, but he died early from the asthma attack. I don't know how good he would have been, but I liked him. I felt that he was going to respond to the needs of the masses of students and teachers, you know. But again, who knows? I don't know. Alvarado was an interesting guy way back in the day. Anthony Alvarado. He ran, District 4 had a lot of non-traditional programs going on, Central Park East being the most famous of them. And Central Park East at that time was a really good school. And these were like magnet schools, you know, with different themes. But Alvarado, I don't know, I don't remember exactly what happened. He was, I think, accused of some kind of behavior that was, maybe he lent money, or was accused of lending money to a teacher, or I don't know, something like that. Now, I don't know enough about, you know, did this happen just because they wanted to get rid of him because he was doing so well? You know, or I don't remember what it was, but I liked him. He was doing, as far as I'm concerned, he was doing good things in the system. But for the most part, you know, it's very hard to change a system. You know, the system has its own energy. The bureaucracy has its own energy. It's usually an unhealthy energy and very hard to do anything with. That's why I think that if we did start a school improvement group in as many schools as possible, you know, and if it's run the right way, where every person really feels a part of it, and we show people what could happen, and we do that at the same time that we open up more programs outside of school where kids can study what they're really interested in. If we work it that way, from within the system and outside the system, then I think that, see, the way that I envision that it could happen is that if you have a lot of community schools that are not connected to the public school system, where they can do what they really
Take
want.
a break. Take a
Yeah.
break.
You don't have to do that. You just have to tell mommy that, mommy, I don't want it. I don't want to carry it, right? I don't want to hold it. Can you take it back, please? Right? You don't have to move. You didn't drop, you threw. You threw it on the ground. What was it? No, you shouldn't do that. So it's rude.
So here we go again. I'm trying to remember exactly what I was saying. I know I was saying something about it, you know, if you create the school improvement group in enough places, but I'm not sure what I was connecting that to right now. God, it's tough getting older and losing your mind a little bit. But it's a reality we got. You trade off experience and life lessons.
Well, electronically, we could listen and see what you said there.
I don't know. Yeah. I know I was talking, and we can do that if you want, but let me see if I can catch it. I think, I got it, good. I think that if we do the school improvement group thing in as many schools as we can, and open up as many community schools as we can, and remind me to talk about specific groups like Brotherhood, Sister Soul. Remind me about that in a second. But if we have enough community schools opening up around the city for those kids and whose parents agree, of course, if they're in a program that they don't feel is working for them, instead to allow them to drop out of school, register as a homeschooler to make it legal, and then go to the community school. If we have more and more of those, what's going to start to happen is more kids are going to leave the regular school because they're not liking regular school, most of them. And they'll hear from their friends, hey, I go to the community center school, it's great. We do this, we do that, I love it. So when that happens, more kids are going to leave. And my thought is that if enough kids start leaving the system, you know, if enough kids walk out of the regular system, then it's going to hit the system in the wallet. Because, you know, they get paid for how many kids they have in the system. And when that happens, then I can see the system saying, whoa, we got to change. We got to change because we're losing too many kids, you know. I could see that happening. That I could easily see that happening. And my thought is, if it doesn't happen, then just continue with the outside schools, because a kid should not be tortured. And in my opinion, most of our kids in regular schools are to some degree being tortured. Shouldn't be. So I think those two things could make a difference. On the inside with the school improvement group, and more community centers outside, community schools. And the reason I mentioned Brotherhood, Sister Soul is because that program, Make the Road in Bushwick, Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, those are 3 programs of many that exist throughout the city that are very good programs for youth. And one of the things that they do a lot of things that all the things I've been talking about that validate the young people. They do things, they talk about the history and culture that the kids come from. They do good work, but they do it after school or on weekends or summers. What I want to say to them is, don't just do it then. Open up a school. Do it during the day also. Those of your kids who are not doing well in regular school, or those who are doing well but still feel that they could benefit better from your program compared to the school program, open up a school. You already have the building. You already have the space. You know, all the kids have to do is, if they're underage, they have to register as a homeschooler. I mean, their parents have to agree, obviously, or their guardians. If they're over age, if they're over 17, I think 17 or 16, I'm not sure what that is nowadays, but whatever the legal age is, then they wouldn't even need parental consent. They don't have to even register as a homeschooler. But either way, have the school during the daytime, as well as after school and weekends and summers. That would be amazing, because they do good work. They do good work. I remember my son, my son is half Latino, and he was a part of a program that Brotherhood Sister Soul ran when he was a teenager. He went to Cuba, and he had an experience. Cuba and Africa. He went to, where did he go in Africa? Where's the place that they sent the slaves from?
Liberia?
No.
Nigeria?
God, I can't remember it. Anyway.
It's on the coast?
I think, yeah. Where they had the last they held the slaves until the ships came. I can't think of where that is.
Okay.
I apologize, everybody. But he went there one summer. He went to Cuba another summer. And both of those were life-changing events for him. So they have outstanding programs. Good staff. Staff who know the kids, who know the culture and care about the kids. So open up a school. It's not that hard to do. For those, let me, since I'm having this conversation, if any of you groups, and there's many others, or an individual, if you want to open up a program for kids that is really to meet their needs, there's a resource. There's this organization called AERO, A-E-R-O, Alternative Education Resource Organization. That's a tremendous organization to help to start a program of your own. Because a lot of the programs that are started, a lot of the democratic schools that exist around the world, have just been started by parents who they don't like what's happening with their kid. And so they say, hey, I'm going to open up a school. And it's not that difficult. It's a little, each state is different, so you have to find out what your particular state needs for you to do. But if I remember correctly, New York State is kind of in between. There's some, there's requirements, but they are not requirements that are really, I can't think of the word, but so difficult that it would stop you. They're not that hard at all. Another resource, a woman named Lori Spiegel. she's kind of the unofficial guru of New York area homeschoolers. And homeschoolers includes unschoolers. And she's a really good resource. So you could Google Laurie Spiegel. I think it's Spiegel. I don't think she has that second E in her last name. New York homeschoolers. And you'll find that connection to her. So Arrow and Laurie with the New York homeschoolers are two good resources to learn how to do this kind of thing legally. And yeah, that would make a difference. That would make a big difference. So what else? Let me see whether there. I think there was something else that I wanted to bring up from last time. No, actually, that's all that I had written down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you could talk to Bernie about the country's need for
Yeah, I mean,
being more open to change. He is pretty open.
yeah. I mean, the thing, and, if Bernie were to get elected, I mean, he's got the kind of values that we would need. He would be very open to things like this, I think. But I mean, the way the system works, the system is so strong. I mean, if Bernie gets elected, first off, what happens in Congress? Maybe if he gets elected, there'd be a lot more Democrats in Congress, because it would mean there was a large turnout. And if there's a large turnout, that could mean a lot more Democrats in Congress. But our system is so flawed. The capitalist system is so flawed. And the corporate people have so much power. They control the media. I don't know. I'm not necessarily optimistic. I mean, if anybody else gets elected, forget about it. Whereas with Bernie, there's a chance, but what happens behind the scenes? Like The Godfather, where they put the horse's head in the guy's bed. The message, is his family. Did Obama's family get threatened? The Obama that I voted for in 2008, I wouldn't vote for him in 2012 after he did what he did. But in 2008, I voted for him based on him saying we're going to change Washington and we're going to be different, and then boom. I mean, did they threaten him? Did they say, look, if you want to see your daughters grow up, you better toe the line? I don't know. I don't think any of us knows what is going on behind the scenes, but that person I voted for, I've never seen him since.
Yeah.
He hasn't been there. Would the same thing happen with Bernie? Would suddenly, all these ideas go out the window and he'll hire Hillary as the Secretary of Defense? So I don't know. I hope he wins, but I don't, because our system is so corrupt and so, I mean, to me, you can't have economic inequality and expect to have social equality. It's just inconsistent. It does not work. If we could sit down, you mentioned last time, the school improvement group doesn't have to happen just in schools. We could have community improvement groups. We could have, if we had local and, let's say in the city, let's say you had local areas that had real transparency and city government had real transparency, and we could create working groups of people of all ages and backgrounds working together to solve problems. And we could fix a lot of things. then we could tackle, what if somebody is willing to work hard, but there's no job out there that he or she can get? Should we look at changing our economic system? Should we do this? Should we do that? That would work, I think. But that would mean people sitting together and having an open mind and a non-programmed mind. I mean, we got a majority of people in this country, large majority, you use the word socialism or communism, boom, forget about it. They're out the window. I did read recently that there were two groups, one in particular, where if you put the word socialism and capitalism in front of them, that they were more open or more oriented towards socialism. And that was the under 30s. The people in this, now this was, I think it was a Gallup poll. And with polls, you always have to, they're just a poll. They might be indicative of what the whole group feels, they might not. But it was still encouraging to see that at least the group of under 30s, I think it was like 43% were good with socialism and 32% capitalism. So my thing is, let's just talk about it. Let's put that on the table. Let's have that happen in our schools. Let kids talk about the advantages and disadvantages of socialism, communism, capitalism, bartering, all kinds of different economic or social systems. Have a conversation, let kids search for truth, let kids come up with answers, or try to find answers. The way it's set up in our society now, most people, they hear the word socialist, boom, they just turn off. Because that's how they've been programmed. So I don't know. I hope Bernie wins. It might happen. The way that it could happen would be the way that it happened with Obama, where a bunch of young people get really enthused and get the vote out and really force a change. But if he gets elected, I do not have a sense of how effective he could or could not be. I really don't know. Yeah. There's another thing that I want to mention too, that because where my head just went with that was, okay, so I don't spend too much time following the political system because it is so screwed up. The fact that at the debates, Nader could not get there. If Jill Stein today is not invited to debates. Rocky Anderson. I don't know if he's running this time, but he ran last time or the time before. He didn't get invited to debates. So people who have really important things to say, who really would be much better than most of, if not all of, the candidates that the public knows about, they don't get invited to the debates because the Republicans and the Democrats control it so much, That's why, there's not this is a whole other conversation and this disagreement amongst my friends even, in some ways there's hardly any difference between Republicans and Democrats, and in some ways, I guess there is. But I don't want to go there. I mean, my thing is, if we are stuck with the same system where only a Democrat or a Republican has a chance to win, and everybody in Congress, 90-something% of the people in Congress are Democrats or Republicans, and lobbyists are allowed to do all the lobbying that they do. If we're stuck with this system, we're in deep trouble. All the things that are going on in the world that are not healthy will continue to go on and get worse, just like has happened in the last 10, 20, 30 years. We got a system where we got the wrong people in charge of making decisions. So as long as that's the case, we're in big trouble.
Your website tries to do something about it.
Yeah, yeah, and what I was gonna say to that is that that's why I think in terms of education, because it's the young people who I see being the catalyst who can make the difference. You know, the young people in harmony with people like you and me and other people that we know. But see, one thing, when adults get, like a young adult, when you get out of school and you start having a family, then you got responsibilities. You got to take care of your kids. You got to take care of your family situation. You got a lot of difficult things to work with. And you don't have the time to, you know, to put into working to make the world a better place. You know, I'm generalizing here. You know, there are people who still do it, but the people who can really do it are the young people. You know, and the second group will be the seniors, the people who have retired, who have some free time. I'd love to see like the young people and the retirees, you know, working together to change things. But I'm getting back, what I was trying to get at is this. I don't pay that much attention to the political system that we have right now, because it doesn't work. You know, voting for the lesser of two evils, you still end up with evil. So, but if young people can get exposed to the other side, other sides, plural, of all these issues, and can know all the stuff that's going on in the world, then they can be the catalyst. They can be the ones who stand up and say, no, we're not going to allow this. You know, this is not going to happen. And I think a lot of them would do that. I mean, it's already happening to some degree. There's a, you know, even though the world in many ways is worse than it's been in my entire lifetime, there is an energy happening. There's a larger, it's a small number still, but an increasing number of people, not just young people, but particularly young people, who are beginning to see the humanistic and healthy sides of things that need to change. And if enough of them get to see that, then I can see us possibly, the world possibly being saved, so to speak. But so that's why you know, my whole thing. We at the end of our talk last time, I forget exactly what you said that made me respond to it, but the point that I said is that the reason that I got into education, trying to change the schools, was only because I want to change the world, you know. And I see education as being one of, if not the best ways to ultimately change the world, if we can find a way to let kids learn the truth. You know, whatever that truth is. Because as I have said before, I don't want it to be my truth. You know, I don't want anybody to think the way I do unless they come to that authentically. You know, think the way you think. Weigh all the stuff out that you can find out and feel what you feel and decide what you decide. But my thing is we have to create a vehicle for them to be exposed to the truth. That's why what I was getting at, that I started to get to, and I went off on one of my own tangents, there are also an increasing number of kids who are just hacking their education. You know, they're on the internet, they're going to sites and they're exposed to things that they never would have learned otherwise, you know. I mean, me too, but it's particularly important for the kids that they are really, some of them are really out there learning really important things. And they also are looking for mentors and apprenticeships and doing a lot of things on their own that schools should be doing, but are not doing. Except some of the democratic schools, the community schools. In those schools, they are doing a lot of that. They are having apprenticeships and community and school working together. And communities and schools should work together. You know, they really need to be almost interchangeable. You know. So I don't know. So that's basically where I'm at. I would have to look through what we've already talked about to see if I can think of anything else I'd want to say. But right now, I feel like that's pretty much it.